Alright guys, so this is going to be the first in what I hope might be a series of review videos to help you guys on your tests. We're currently sitting in my backyard. This is my first foray into YouTube teaching. I've seen lots of other people do it, so it can't be that hard. Up here, hopefully, is where you should be able to find the graphics that we're going to be referring to during this video. If not, well, so our first unit that we're going to be covering this quarter is geography and historical thinking. These are two big ones because they set a groundwork for everything that we're going to be moving forward through this year. Kicking it off with geography, the first thing that we really focus on is the first 5 major regions of the United States. Now there should be an infographic up here in the corner. We're going to kick it off with number 1, which is the West Coast. Now on this map, it doesn't really show Alaska and Hawaii, which is fine because they're weird. They don't really fit here. There are a lot of people just throw them in there because it is. So the West Coast is going to be labeled number 1. This region is the most diverse. It features the weirdest kind of combination of land and land features because it doesn't really make sense with anything else, so it just kind of got shoved into its own region. In this area, you can find very cold regions like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, very cold during the winter, but good for growing for the most part of the rest of the year. But you also get California, which is great for growing, or droughts, kind of a wild vary in between. Pacific Northwest with Washington and Oregon, rain, 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 pretty trees, rain. Bouncing over to our next region in the middle, that's going to be your Midwest. These states are flat, farmland, beautiful for growing things. The northern region, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, cold. Ohio, Indiana can also be kind of cold during the winter. Lots of rain, lots of weather because of the Great Lakes and all that. They bring in moisture that's going to hit that area hard. Third region that we're going to focus on is going to be the Northeast. Now this area, when it was originally settled by colonists, it was settled because it had lots of ports, easy to get boats in and out of. Great for that. They got there and found out, though, it's cold. Real cold. Like all the stereotypes you've heard about New York winter, cold. They also found that it was kind of hard to grow in because the soil is very rocky, it's very dense, it's hard to dig into. People who landed here initially had trouble learning how to farm this area because it's very different than what they're used to. Bouncing over to region number 4, that's going to be your Southwest, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona. That region is hot, hot, hot. Very little rainfall with the exception of areas that are around the Gulf of Mexico, which can pull in rain. Texas is decent for growing stuff, but it's extremely hot. New Mexico and Arizona, they're just hot, dry deserts covered in plateaus and Grand Canyons. Beautiful landscape, but not necessarily the most habitable for survival. Then your 5th region, that's the Southeast, home state. That's where we live. This area features mountains, coastlines, great flat land in some parts for growing. This was the birthplace of the cotton industry in the South. Tons of cotton grown here. Worked out wonderful for that. Alright, let's bounce over to the home state. Alright, up here in the corner you're going to see a map of North Carolina. Furthest to the west you're going to find the mountains. This region has some areas that are available for growing, but it's not the best. It's very rocky soil. It's also kind of a pain in the butt to try and plant something and grow it on the side of a mountain. Nobody really, sorry, mosquitoes, outside and all that. Nobody really wants to try and plant and plow up the side of a mountain. One thing this area is amazing for, lumber. Trees everywhere. A large chunk of North Carolina's lumber production comes from the mountain region. They cut it down and then they ship it to our next region, right smack in the middle, the Piedmont. This area is flat, so it can grow agriculturally, but it's got rivers, it's good for living on, and this is where our population centers become. This area is where we now feature most of North Carolina's major industries: banking, biotechnology, technology, some still with industrial textiles and things like that. But this area is called Piedmont because of the rolling hills. It's not flat, but it's also not a mountain. Now, once we get to the coastal plains, the all the way east region, you'll notice that this region is flat. That's why it's called the coastal plains. This area is good for growing. The soil is well suited to growing things, with the exception of the sandy Outer Banks coast area. That part can be kind of a pain to grow on. But this area is good for growing. It was also one of the major population hubs for this region because of the ports and things like that. The major port that we've got, though, is Wilmington. The rest of them are kind of a pain because you'll notice that they're blocked in by the Outer Banks or barrier islands. These islands do offer North Carolina a little bit of protection from weather and early on from people who had less scrupulous morals, pirates. It works pretty well for growing in that area, but those ocean-bound areas made it kind of hard to get to in some cases. Alright, rolling over, let's review our 5 lenses of history. History. First one, culture. Culture is a big one because culture is where we look at the traditions, the beliefs, the values that people have. This tells us a lot about why people do things in their belief systems. This can be looking at religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or it can be looking at traditions that aren't religious based, like Thanksgiving or Labor Day, Memorial Day. But it is also very, very insightful to look at the values that certain regions, certain cultures have. These values tell us a lot about what they think is important and what they think is worth doing. Okay? Rolling on to our next big lens is geography. Geography, a lot of people think it's an easy one to cover. It's how the land affects the people, how the people affect the land. So, there are a couple things that people have to be able to survive. Water, food, shelter. The land gives you all 3 of those if you settle in the right spot. Early people who settled along the coastline found out this area is great for water, except it's salty. They found it's great for growing, except it's sandy. They found that they could build stuff, except there weren't that wasn't a good area at all for them. But regions that feature fresh water, lumber for building, and places to plant or hunt were great for food. So geography affects where and why people settle the places they settle. Our next lens we're going to look at is just flat out history. History is overall, biggest definition for it is how things used to be compared to how they are now. How did things change? What changed between the two? How did people go from the way they used to be to how they are now? How did women get the right to vote? How did African Americans escape slavery, become free citizens, and become a big participant in politics? Let's go ahead and talk about politics since we're there. Politics, I define it as the way that people group together to get things done. In our country, in the United States, we tend to focus on things in terms of Democrats and Republicans. Politics is more than just 2 groups, though. Politics is how groups of people band together to get things accomplished. If you think about your daily life, you're probably sitting there looking at this video, and because you're watching the video, that means you have electricity and internet, both of which we wouldn't have really without politics and government. Politicians get together, they discuss what's good for their group, they hash it out, they work it out. We get electricity thanks to the TVA. We'll get to that later. We get internet thanks to the FCC and telecommunications. So these groups that work together, they help create the things that we need to survive. They make surviving easier, which I know is hard to believe, especially in the political climate we deal with now. Let's go ahead and roll to our last major lens, which is economics. Economics, I define it as how people trade resources for goods and services. That trade can be in the form of money, where I give you cash, you give me thing, we're both happy, because now you can use that cash to go get what you want, and I have what I want, because I bought it from you. Or they can be in the form of trade. Think old-timey. I have chicken, you have shoe. I give you chicken, you give me shoe. Both parties happy. My feet no longer naked, you no longer starve. So we can have cash-based economies, trade-based economies, and there's a wide variety in between. So those cover your 5 lenses. You've got culture, beliefs, traditions, values. Geography, how the land affects the people and vice versa. History, how we got from then to now. Politics, how people got together to make things work for everybody. And economics, how I give you stuff and you give me stuff.